Hope all of you are having a good day. Today we'll be beginning with the chapter elections. Elections, it's not a new word. For the previous chapters that we've had, for the chapter names, there were names that we hadn't really heard before, right? Names that were new to us. But elections, it's a pretty familiar word. We all know what elections are. We will be looking at certain things. We'll be looking at something called the election commissioner and what the election commissioner is, what the person's responsibilities are, and then we'll be looking at what do the parties have to do in order to contest for elections, what do the voters have to do, how can a citizen of India be qualified to become a voter, and certain things along those lines. And then at the end we'll also be looking at certain other constitutional and non-constitutional bodies. I know constitutional and non-constitutional bodies is not something we've learned, so we'll also be looking at the definition and then some examples and all of that. So before we begin, I'll just let you have a quick skim through what we'll be learning today. We'll be starting with the election commission. We'll look at the powers and functions, the composition, things of that sort. And then we'll move on to the election commissioner. We'll see some election commissioners we have had. In fact, all the election commissioners we have had up until now. And then we will look at the functions of the election commission. We'll look at the electronic voting machine and some points related to it. And then we'll look at political parties in the election commission. And then we'll also be looking at kinds of parties. What are national parties? What are state parties? What are the criteria? What is the criteria that you have to become a national party or the state party? Right. And then we'll be looking at something called the delimitation commission. This is something that you will see right from the very first page of this chapter, but we'll be explaining it in detail later on at this point. And then we'll look at the qualification of voters, and then another very interesting thing, none of the above vote. It's called nota. Then we'll look at prohibition of campaign during the last 48 hours, other constitutional and non-constitutional bodies, and that's it, right? So with that, we'll be done with the chapter. So, if you have noticed through the skim that we have done, you might have noticed that it seems that there's a lot of theory, right? The pages are filled with sentences. So you might feel that there is a lot of theory, but actually, you have a lot. If you check in terms of words or sentences, obviously there are more words, there is more content in that sense, but there's not a lot of theory for you to study. It's mainly about powers, functions, things of that sort, right? So you just need to read it once, understand it, and then it'll be fine. It's just for you to understand what does this body do, right? Other than that, if you look at it from an objective perspective, there is not a lot of theory for you to study from an objective perspective. Okay, since most of your entrance exams are objective, or all of them for your military schools, right? So from that perspective, there's not a lot to study in this chapter. Anyway, let's begin. So we look at election commission first. What is an election commission? What do they do? So we have the definition here. Basically, the election commission is an autonomous constitutional authority. 3 important words, responsible for the conduct of elections in India. Their objective, we'll be describing the objective in detail, but in just a couple of words, what they need to do is conduct elections in India. That's all that they need to do. Okay, now what do we mean by autonomous constitutional authority is the question. Okay, so right, first let's constitutional, we'll learn it later on. Like I said, at the end we have something called constitutional and non-constitutional bodies, right? So then we learn what it means for something to be a constitutional body. So election commission is actually a constitutional body, right? So which is why it is called a constitutional authority. So what does it mean for a commission or a body to be a constitutional body? We shall learn it later. But now we look at this term, autonomous. What do we mean by some body being autonomous? Basically, what we mean is that this body is not under the influence of some other body or some other governmental structure. No, and they are independent. Right, so they function as an independent body. They are not under the influence of some other governmental structure. So the reason that we have this is to reduce partiality when it comes to elections, because we know elections in a country, in a democracy like India, election is one of the most significant part of how the country functions, right? Because it depends, I mean, how your country will look like in the next couple of years depends on who is going to be ruling it, and who is going to be ruling it depends on who you elect. And it's important that your election process is transparent. It is important that there is no partiality, there is no rigging of votes in the election process, right? So to sort of ensure that this happens is why the election commission was built. And it is an autonomous constitutional authority, right? So what we mean by autonomous, like I said, is basically they are an independent body, not under the influence of any other body. So now I'll just give you an example for autonomous. Okay, consider a university. So if you consider colleges, most colleges come under some universities. So if you take Delhi, for example, it's usually in a state or a certain area. So you have Delhi University, right? And you have colleges that come under the university. So for a college that comes under Delhi University, what we mean is that the college is bound by certain rules or certain guidelines that the Delhi University sets. So for example, if there is a rule for attendance, the college has to follow it. Or if there is a rule, for example, if the question papers, the semester exam question papers are set by university, those are the papers that the college will be using, right? So that's what we mean when a college is basically this college is under the influence of Delhi University. It's not independent, right? A lot of functional aspects of the college depends on the university. Now, if you have an autonomous college, right, what do we mean by a college being autonomous? Basically, they are independent. They are an independent body. They are not under the influence of the university. So, it could be that they can conduct their own papers. Their papers do not have to be the papers set by university. They do not have to follow the rules set by the university, things of that sort. So, basically, they are an independent body, not under the influence of Delhi University. That's what we mean, right? So, that's the same thing that we mean when we talk about the election commission. So, the election commission, it does not have to work under the influence of, say, the legislature or the executive or the judiciary. The reason we have this is because the legislature and the executive are mostly led by people who are from the ruling party, right? So now if the election commission comes under the influence of the legislature, what we mean as a result is that the election commission is under the influence of the ruling party. So then there is a very high chance for there to be some partial voting or something of that sort when it comes to elections. The elections could be rigged. There might be some pressure on the election commission, to get certain kinds of votes. So a lot of things that could happen, right? So to sort of get rid of all this is why the election commission was set up as an autonomous constitutional authority. Okay. Now, when was it established? 25th January 1950. 25th January is it's a day on which one of my friends' birthdays fall. Anyway, so the election commission was established on 25th January 1950. Which article? 324. Okay, the article is 324 of the Constitution of India. Now, the primary objective of this commission is to ensure free, fair and impartial elections in the country. Okay, this is, like I said, this is the whole point of why do you have an election commission? Why do you have a separate body? Why can't you just have this as the function of the legislature? Or, okay, maybe not the legislature, but why not the executive? Because you want an independent body. Because, like I said, the legislature and the executive were mostly led by people of the ruling party. And you don't want people of any certain party handling something as significant as elections, right? So that's why the election commission was set up. And here you have some key points. Composition. The election commission consists of the chief election commissioner, CEC and other election commissioners, if any. Okay, so why have we mentioned if any? This is not necessary. So usually the structure that you have is that you will have one chief election commissioners and two other election commissioners. This is the usual structure, but it's not necessary that this be followed. Okay, that's what we have meant by if any. The President of India appoints the Chief Election Commissioner and election commissioners. Okay, these people are appointed by the President. This too, like I said, I had said earlier, that I think we had discussed this in the chapter on, during the chapter on executive. So when it comes to appointing people at certain positions, maybe it be somebody in the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, or the Prime Minister, or people at certain governmental positions are mostly appointed by the President of India. And this sometimes this is done in recommendation with the Prime Minister, but appointing people is usually the job of the President of India. Okay, right. So usually the commission comprises one chief election commissioner and two election commissioners. This is what I said, right? So basically there is, like I've written here, one CEC, chief election commissioners, and two other election commissioners. Now we'll be looking at the powers and functions of the election commissioner. Election commission. We have not yet begun on the election commissioner. We'll be looking at the powers and functions of the election commission. Superintendence, direction and control of elections. The Election Commission has the authority to supervise and control all aspects of the electoral process, including the preparation of electoral rolls, delimitation of constituencies, and the conduct of elections. This is, like I said, I mean, it's their job, right? It's a commission set up purely for elections. So they have the power to supervise, and not just supervise, but also to control all aspects of the electoral process. Registration of political parties. The Commission is responsible for the registration and recognition of political parties. So, if a certain party wants to register for elections, what symbol should be given to the party, all of this, the Commission is the one that's responsible. Model Code of Conduct. The Election Commission lays down the Model Code of Conduct to ensure fair play and adherence to ethical standards by political parties and candidates during elections, right? So Election Commission lays down something called the Model Code of Conduct. What do we mean by Model Code of Conduct? Basically, the way in which a body should behave. That's what we mean by Model Code of Conduct, right? So the ideal way in which a certain body should behave. What are the things that they should not do? What are the things that they should do? All of these are, as sort of written down as guidelines under the Model Code of Conduct. Now, moving on, next we'll be looking at election related disputes, right? So all of this comes under the powers of the Election Commission. Now, election related disputes. So basically the commission adjudicates on disputes that are related to elections, such as, disqualification of candidates and party symbols. So if, like I said, there is a Model Code of Conduct that we discussed in the last page, right? So basically, if that conduct is not followed, or if something else happens, if something illegal is done, there will be disqualification of candidates and party symbols. And once that happens, there will definitely be disputes, right? There will be discussions, there will be disputes. Very heated discussions are also expected. So for all of this, the commission adjudicates on all of these disputes. What do we mean by the word adjudicate? This is something that we had discussed. We had seen this word, I think, multiple times in the chapter on, I don't exactly remember which chapter, I think the chapter on judiciary. Yeah, it would be judiciary, because the word is adjudicate. So this is sort of similar to judge. What we mean by adjudicate is basically passing a formal judgment pertaining to something, right? So if some issue happens and you pass a judgment that is in a formal setting, a formal judgment, that's what we mean by adjudicate. So commission adjudicates on all of these disputes. Okay, such as the disqualification of candidates and party symbols, things like that. Independence, this is what we had talked about initially under autonomy, right? So the election commissioner operates independently and is not subject to the control or influence, like I've explained, of the government. It exercises its powers without any external interference to ensure impartiality. So it is important that there be no external interference. Okay. Moving on to electoral reforms. The Election Commission plays a crucial role in recommending electoral reforms to improve the electoral process, enhance transparency and strengthen democracy, right? So you have certain rules. I mean, when we talked about the Constitution, right? So Constitution is a very detailed document. It is the lengthiest written document that we have for a country. But it's important that you keep amending it, because we are all humans at the end of the day, and we might not have thought away everything, right? Or there might be something that was not an issue earlier, but now is a very prevalent issue. Like, for example, electronic voting machines were not in place initially. They were introduced only later. So there might be, there are people who say there is a problem, some with electoral voting machines. The votes, you vote for a party, it doesn't go to the party, it goes to some other party. party. So like this is just an example. So you might find that there are some things to be corrected in things that you are not thought of before. So it's important that you suggest reforms, right? So Election Commission plays a crucial role in recommending electoral reforms to improve the electoral process, enhance transparency and strengthen democracy. This is what they do. So RPA 1951 and Delimitation Commission 1952 also govern the elections. Okay. Now these are other two places that govern the elections. RPA 1951, Delimitation Commission 1952. Both of these also govern the elections. The Representation of People Act 1950. Okay, wait, I forgot to tell you what the RPA is. It's basically an act. It's called the Representation of People Act. Okay. Representation of People Act. And basically it was just to make sure that people are represented properly and all groups of people are represented, and the Delimitation Commission is something that we will be learning later on. Anyway, so these also govern the election. So basically the main body that governs elections is definitely the Election Commission, but you also have these bodies which also have some sort of power when it comes to governing the elections. Okay, the Representation of People Act RPA 1950 governs the provisions related to the preparation of electoral rolls and voter registration. Okay, so RPA 1950, it governs the provisions related to the preparation of electoral rolls and voter registration. The elections to panchayats and municipalities are vested in the State Election Commission as given in Article 243K and 243ZA respectively. Okay, so elections to panchayats and municipalities. Right, so why did we have to mention this in particular? Because other than that, when you talk about state elections, it already happens when you conduct elections. Because see, if you, for example, the president to be selected or the prime minister to be selected, what's the process? First, the citizens select the MLAs, members of the legislative assemblies. And then these members of the legislative assembly select members of the parliament. And then these members of the parliament select the president, who then appoints the prime minister, right? So for the prime minister to be elected or for the president to be elected or the prime minister to be appointed, first you need MLAs, members of the state legislative assembly. So elections at the state level has to first take place, right? So that is already, when we talk about elections at the center, we already include elections at the state level. What is not included is this elections to panchayats and municipalities. So you have this the ones who look after that is the State Election Commission, and these are given in Article 243K and 243ZA respectively. Okay, moving on. So we are done with Election Commission. We'll look at the functions of the Election Commission a bit later after this topic. Let's just look at Election Commissioner now. So like we said, in addition to the Chief Election Commissioner, the Election Commission may have other election commissioners. The election commissioners assist the Chief Election Commissioner in carrying out the functions of the commission. They collectively make decisions on various electoral matters. However, the Chief Election Commissioner has the final say in case of any differences of opinion. Okay, the Chief Election Commissioner is the one that has the final say in case of any differences of opinion. So you have the Chief Election Commissioner here, you have the tenure, and you will be looking at this, the different Chief Election Commissioners and the tenure. Okay, so we actually have this from the very first Chief Election Commissioner up until the one that's ruling, I mean not ruling, but up until the one that's at this position in the present, right? So it started with Sukumar Sen. His tenure was from 1950 to 1958, and then we had KVK Sundaram 1958 to 1967, SP Sen Verma, Dr. Nagendra Singh, T. Swaminathan, S.L. Shakhtar. By the time it was S.L. Shakhtar, his tenure was from 1977 to 1982. R.K. Trivedi 1982 to 1985, R.V.S. Peri Shastri 1986 to 1990, Srimati V.S. Ramadevi 1990 to 1991, T.N. Seshan 1991 to 1996, M.S. Gill 1996 to 2001, J.M. Lingdo 2001 to 2004, T.S. Krishnamurthy 2004 to 5, B.B. Tandon 2005 to 6, N. Gopalaswamy 2006 to 9, Naveen Chawla 2009 to 10, S.Y. Qureshi 2010 to 12, V.S. Sampath 2012 to 15, H.S. Brahma 2015, Nazim Zaidi 2015 to 17, Achal Kumar Jyoti 2017 to 18, Om Prakash Rawat 18 to 19, Sunil Arora 19 to 21, and Sushil Chandra 21 to present, right? So you don't really have to learn these are not very important chief election commissioners and their tenures. Maybe just read through it. So whenever you study this chapter, just sort of read through it, read everything, and just take a look at their tenure. So you will see the first people initially, they their tenure was for about, I mean, they were there in power for about 8 years, right? The first person was in power for 8 years, the second person was in power for about 9 years. But then if you look at the most recent people, they have been in tenure for only about, like, either 2 years or 1 year. The tenure has been very short. Alright, so these are just things you can look at, and like I say, always sort of try to conduct a critical analysis on, like I've said, I think, in my last chapter. So yeah, try to conduct a critical analysis, look at, who all has been the tenure and how many, if you want to also look at how many women chief election commissioners have you had, how many female chief election commissioners have you had, what has their tenure been like. So here we saw Srimati V.S. Ramadevi, right, just 1990 to 1991, just 1 year. So things like that you can look into it if you're interested. How is the female representation there? Things like that if you want to look at, if you have any people from lower caste or from scheduled caste or scheduled tribes, people from religious minorities, those are also things that you could look into as well. Okay. Now that being said, let's move on to functions of election commissioner. Okay. So moving on to functions of election commissioner. What are the functions? We will be looking at 6-7 functions of the election commissioner. It begins with conducting elections. The election commissioner is responsible for conducting elections at various levels, including Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, state legislative assemblies, and local bodies. This is something that we had mentioned, right? Even for the local bodies, you have the election commission, you have state election commissioners, which are responsible for conducting the elections. It ensures the smooth and fair conduct of elections. Okay. Moving on to voter registration. This basically they need to prepare and revise electoral rolls. It ensures that eligible citizens are registered as voters and have access to the right to vote. What do we mean by electoral rolls? Basically, you just have this whole list of people who are eligible to vote, right? And even so, the process is basically once you turn 18, that's when you will be eligible to vote. You need to get yourself registered in the electoral, the voters list. There's something called the voters list where you need to get yourself registered, and then your name will be added to the electoral roll. Only after that can you actually, participate in elections. Sorry, not participate, participate in the selection process, as in, be able to vote in very simple terms. Delimitation of constituencies. Again, this is something that we will be learning in detail, but just take a quick look at what it means. The Election Commission carries out the process of delimitation, which involves the division of areas into separate electoral constituencies based on population and other relevant factors. Basically, what you are doing under delimitation of constituencies is that, see, election happens at the level of constituencies, right? People vote for a member of legislative assembly for their own constituency. So now how do you divide an area? Like, if you see, some states have a lot of constituencies, but some states have only very less constituencies. For some other states, they might have just one constituency, right? So on what basis do you do this? How do you divide areas into constituencies, right? So it's basically mostly on the basis of population, but sometimes they do also take other factors into consideration. But yeah, this process of deciding how many constituencies do you need, and once that's decided, okay, do we need to club two constituencies together now, or this constituency, there is too much of a population there, do we have to divide it into two other constituencies? Questions like this are also the function of the Election Commission. Model Code of Conduct. The Election Commission lays down the Model Code of Conduct, which provides guidelines for political parties and candidates during elections. It ensures fair play, ethical behavior, and maintenance of law and order. Right. So that's another thing. Like we had already said this under, I think, powers in the first, initially when we studied up, under powers and functions, we had already mentioned this. But yeah, so that's a Model Code of Conduct. And then political party registration. Again, to register, this is also something that we have already discussed, to be able to register political parties and grant them recognition. That is also the work of the Election Commission. Okay, and now something very important, election monitoring. The commission monitors the entire election process, including campaign activities, political advertising, and the conduct of political parties and candidates. It takes necessary actions against violations or malpractices. This is something that is very important, to monitor the election process. May it be campaign activities, political advertising, and the conduct of political parties and candidates. Okay. So, moving on, electoral reforms. The Election Commission suggests reforms and improvements in the electoral system to enhance transparency, efficiency, and inclusiveness. This is also something that we had already mentioned, right? It's important to have reforms, as I said, for any system, whatever the system may be, as long as it's something we have set as humans, it's important that we keep a check on what's been happening, how has the impact been, and also keep revising it. As you know, revising, it's not important that you always bring changes, but it's important that you always review what has been done. You always evaluate what you have been doing. Okay, it works towards promoting voter awareness and participation. This is what you have under electoral reforms. Moving on, electronic voting machine. What is an electronic voting machine or an EVM? Basically, it is a device used to record votes internally. Okay, the purpose of the device is to record votes. Sorry, did I say internally? No, I meant electronically. Okay, electronic voting machine. The purpose of this machine is to record votes electronically. It has replaced traditional paper ballots in many countries, including India. The EC. What is EC? Election Commission. Election Commission took a decision to use only EVMs in the 2004 Lok Sabha election. So from then onwards, we've been using only EVMs for our elections. So basically, I mean, I'm not sure. Have you seen an electronic voting machine? Just search it up on Google. Basically, something like this. The name of the party will be given, the symbol, and then you will have a button. So just click on the button for which party you want to vote. Now, functioning. Basically, that's what I just explained. You have a set of buttons or symbols corresponding to various candidates and parties. Voters select their preferred candidate by pressing the respective button. The EVM records the vote electronically. Advantages: speed and efficiency. EVMs expedite the voting process and enable quick counting of votes. Okay. So this is a very important advantage. What the problem that you had with the traditional ballot system? Okay, do you guys know what the traditional ballot system was? You would have the names of different parties mentioned on a ballot paper. It's basically just a sheet of paper with the name of the party and the symbol, and it usually is, you would have either a box where you need to tick or something like that, right? So you sort of just either tick or do something of that sort to register your vote. The problem with this is, one is there is a huge waste of paper involved, right? And the second problem is the speed and efficiency, because this counting used to be done by people, and when it's done by people, one, there is the problem of speed, and then there is also the fact that there could be error when people vote, when people count, and then there is also problem of you need to make sure that the ones voting are impartial. See, if the person counting the vote is a supporter of a particular party, there is a very high chance that they miscount the votes on purpose. So there are two things: either they could miscount it by mistake or on purpose. It's important for you to make sure that that does not happen. So speed and efficiency, accuracy. EVMs minimize errors and reduce the chances of invalid votes due to the use of symbols and clear instructions. Okay, right. There are also some chances of invalid votes, as in, people might vote somewhere in between. So there is one party and a second party. People might sort of put a tick that seems like it belongs to the first one, but is also a tick to the second, right? So, I mean, people can make all sorts of mistakes, but if it's a machine, it's going to be clear. They're going to click on one button. You can't click on two buttons at the same time. And even if you click on two buttons, the button you clicked on the button that you clicked on first, that's where the vote will go for. Anyway, now portability. EVMs are portable and easy to transport, making them suitable for deployment in remote or difficult to reach areas. That's another very important thing, right? They're small, portable and easy to transport, so it makes it easier, to have them in remote areas. Voter verified paper audit trail. We'll be looking at something called the VVPAT. Voter verified paper audit trail. What is it? voter verified paper audit trail. What is it? Basically, it's an additional feature that you have with EVMs. What does it do? You get a physical paper trail of the votes cast electronically. So all the votes that were cast electronically, you will also get a physical paper trail. Now, why? So you can, it is so in order to verify your vote on a printed paper slip. So you might feel that, okay, if I vote for this party, is it really going to this party or is it going to some other party? You can have all these questions, right? So there is this additional feature. It's not available in all places where an election is held, but in most of the places, yes. You basically get a physical printed slip. It shows which party have you voted for. Okay, so you get to verify your vote and then it is deposited in a sealed box. So you have that as, it's deposited. So you have that as a traditional ballot paper system also. You have votes also in the form of paper. VVPAT enhances transparency and builds confidence in the electoral process. So that is what VVPAT is for. But even after this, there have been cases of people saying that there are, mistakes in EVMs. It does not go to the party you vote for, but as much as we know, it seems to be pretty reliable, right? Electronic voting machines. So that's what we have under electronic voting machine. With that, we're done with the first part of the chapter. We'll conduct a separate session for the second part of the chapter. Okay, so we're done. We'll end here, electronic voting machine. The next session, we will begin with political parties and the election commission. What are the processes that they need to do and stuff like that. Okay, so we'll have that in the next class.